If we define our problems as us versus them, they will become us versus them. And we have a lot of reason to believe that we're going to head off in that direction. Our ignorance, our lack of understanding of the rest of the world, our lack of empathy, our inability to understand anything from another perspective, our fear, the kind of fear that obviously is threatening Obama's campaign, the Muslim, the other. This is a pervasive feature of the whole world, not just our society. But it doesn't matter how sophisticated and rich and all the rest, the capacity to go off in that direction is very, very high. And in my view, John McCain exemplifies that. And that's a big issue. I'm not intrinsically a partisan person. I have actually relatively little interest in partisanship per se. Not after a job in Washington, I can tell you that for sure. But I am worried very much by what's happening right now in the way we pose the global challenges. Second, I believe that we're seeing, and I see it every month in my work, wherever I am, gravely threatening our well-being through resource depletion and destruction, environmental degradation, and increasing marginalization of large parts of the world that are facing global environmental threats that have nothing to do from what came locally, but end up destroying or threatening those societies. Haiti is underwater now, partly because it's a crowded, deforested environment, but to take a note from Kerry Emanuel at MIT, the great atmospheric dynamicist at MIT, the frequency of high-intensity hurricanes in the Caribbean is on the rise because of anthropogenic global warming. And that is not Haiti's fault. In the places I'm working in East Africa, drought is becoming more and more frequent. People are dying massively from this. You don't read the names. We don't read the stories. When we do, we usually find some way to blame them for these mishaps because we define problems in ways that exculpate ourselves, and because, unfortunately, the journalists don't really understand these things any better than anybody else. But we end up with tremendous threats to large populations as a result of these global changes. We've had massive typhoons that have killed hundreds of thousands of people in recent years. More extreme tropical events in South Asia, in East Asia, in the Caribbean. Massive droughts that carry away vast numbers of children from hunger and the immunosuppression that comes with inadequate food supply. And I see in many parts of the world, such as when I was in Malaysia, Borneo last month, truck after truck after truck after truck of big diptocarps, the great trees just being leveled, carried out, the environment denuded, and indigenous groups basically thrown off the land to make way for the loggers and then for the palm oil plantations that will follow after the logging. And this is happening all over the world as well, because weak people, dispossessed groups, never can claim their rights and never can hold on to informal or traditional or group claims compared to the weight of commercial interests, the way we define things in this world. And so I happen to be in a community of indigenous or Orang Asli populations in Sarawak. And despite the rights that they supposedly have under the Constitution, they are nowhere to be seen and nowhere to be enforced. And actually, We saw the longhouses just literally bulldozed to get people to leave the area so that the logging can continue. And third, this leads to tremendous violence and instability, which then John McCain calls Islamic extremism, or we tend to ascribe to the unruliness of some other populations. In a large swath of the world, really stretching from the drylands of Senegal through Mali, through Niger, through Chad, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Yemen, the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan. That whole swath of several thousand miles is a drylands region. In general, it's becoming drier because of the warming of the Indian Ocean and the consequent drying of this vast belt. It's leading to more hunger. It's leading to loss of livestock and livelihoods. At the same time, the population in this region is exploding because the fertility rates remain very, very high. There's very little contraception to be found. We don't talk about these things, neither do these countries especially. With a few examples, the US cuts the budget for family planning, denounces the UN Population Fund and all the rest. And so we have like two blades of a scissors, falling water availability and rising populations. And this leads to explosions like Darfur, or in the most extreme cases, in what's one of the driest places on the whole planet, Somalia, where the entire government infrastructure collapses to the point where there is no national government anymore and hasn't been for the last 15 years. It would be very surprising if that didn't provoke instability, violence, bases of terrorism, and the like. And lo and behold, of course it does. And the US response typically is to set up the African command of the US military. That's our newest innovation. I see American soldiers all over the place when I travel. We call this Islamic extremism. We view Darfur not as one of the worst crises of water and food on the planet, but only in the context of our ideological battles with Khartoum. So we don't understand the underpinnings of migration from the north of Darfur when the drying occurred of nomadic populations who then came in and tried to, with the backing of the regime, ethnically cleanse the more sedentary, subhumid, but not as arid parts of southern Darfur. But at the core of this is water. It's food. It's livelihoods, with a backdrop of burgeoning populations and worsening environmental conditions. But we label all of this as the enemy. And every couple of months we send bombers in. This is the approach that a country with a very high capital labor ratio would take. We don't have very many troops, as you know, so we bomb. More and more, when we bomb, we kill women and children, destroy villages. Can't quite understand why people aren't thrilled with this. We tell lies so relentlessly, it's absolutely impossible now to comprehend how dramatically we lie every day. Anyone under a US bomb is an insurgent. That's almost a definition in the newspapers. And we have a cowardly press that is afraid of losing advertising revenues. We've essentially lost the voice of an independent New York Times, which in my view has become not quite a rag, but almost useless for understanding what's going on, because they're so conservative that they won't question these things.